So as we're talking about this and, the idea that the market is changing, people's sentiments within the industry are changing, because this is a conversation about a podcast about money and technology, I would be remiss if I didn't point out the fact that one of the things that we should also be considering is that the majority of tech workers, if not all, a significant component of their paycheck is equity in the company that they work for, right? So as we're talking about making some of these moves, one of the things that I always recommend that people pay attention to is the forfeiture value of the shares that they have, right? If I sign on a 4-year agreement, I receive 4 years worth of shares, a 4-year vesting timetable from XYZ company. I've got to consider what the value of those shares still on the table are before deciding to make any significant moves. And so I always encourage people to you know, it's a conversation about making sure your emergency fund is where you need it to be to cover 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, what have you, of income before you can make a leap, or should something happen that's not part of your plan. Also making sure that you're paying attention to how much you'd be leaving on the table in the form of equity comp if you did make that kind of move, or if something happened that wasn't part of your plan.
So this is not investment advice, but it has been interesting to see friends within the tech companies. They believe in their companies, and so they hold a tremendous amount of stock, and they don't diversify.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been kind of an interesting few years. Like I had friends who, were Facebook employees and held all this Facebook stock. And I was like, don't do that. Like diversify. And then of course 2022 comes and the stock goes down a lot. And I'm like, oh, you should have diversified.
Yeah.
And then it bounced back and now they're kind of laughing at me. Right. So I still believe that, holding too much stock in one company is a liability. I'm curious what you think, especially imagine I gave that advice to somebody who was working at NVIDIA last year.
Right.
They wouldn't talk to me ever again. How did you navigate that, by the way?
You're kind of preaching the sermon from my notes, right? Like I'm constantly telling clients of ours that no more than 20% of your net worth should be tied to one individual security, regardless of whether it's a company, a Bitcoin token, a real estate project, whatever. Like you don't want one asset to represent more than 20% of your balance sheet. But at the same time, to your point, you make that recommendation, somebody sells a significant stake of their NVIDIA shares, NVIDIA goes from 400 to 800 a share in 18 months or less. And all of a sudden they're looking at you and going, you just committed malpractice almost, right? So one of the things that I always encourage people to do is, one, sell enough shares to cover the estimated taxes that you're going to have due on that growth, right? Because one thing people never think about until it's already April 15th is the IRS is going to want their cut. And so at least sell enough of those shares to cover that additional tax bill that's going to be due, so you're not having to scramble to come up with cash out of nowhere or pay your tax bill on your credit card or whatever else people end up doing.